Good afternoon. I couldn't find my button. I couldn't find my button to bring myself on. So good afternoon. It's a oh my goodness. If you can't get out today, take this on, do this on your phone and go watch it outside. It is so beautiful, and it's supposed to rain at some points during this weekend. But I was just out there, took a little break and went out. It was so nice. So take your phone and go sit outside, and I'm going to bring Mary on. Hey, Mary, what's up?
Happy Friday. It is beautiful, just gorgeous outside.
It really is. And hopefully we won't hear my husband doing farm chores in the background again.
That's okay. We have quite a conversation ahead of us here. I actually think that this conversation about conflicts of interest is at the core of what's wrong in our state government.
Well, let's do a little bit of chit chat about that here.
Okay.
Remember, we had Charles Key on our regular 9 o'clock podcast this morning. And he was talking, and I've got to get his book. It's on Amazon. And I've forgotten, oh gosh, help me, what's the title of the book?
Oh, I lost it. Yep. Nope. I don't have it. I was going to go look by his name.
Yeah, darn it. I don't know why. It's just, I can see the cover because I remember it's OSU orange.
But I'm going to get it as well. An in-depth look from the inside about our state legislature and how things work when someone runs for one of these offices to represent you as your state representative or your state senator. And you vote based on their platform and what they're putting out there publicly about their positions. And then you're just constantly so dismayed about how they turn completely around when they're voting and with the legislation that they're pushing. And I can't wait to read it because he talks a lot about those moments, those arm twisting moments, where the power lies, what happened after 2010 when that referendum by miracle of God above brought in term limits for our state office holders and our legislators. I can't wait to read it. Really interesting.
Well, I thought his main thesis is that if leadership won't allow bills to be heard, then it's suppressing the liberty of the patriots, which is, truly, you look at Jim Shaw, for example, he gets elected and then the leadership just shuts him out because they liked Kevin Wallace. He was a friend. And that's the important part about our legislatures who we're friends with. And so, if they're friends and you knock out one of their friends, then you just get frozen out. And he didn't get a single bill heard. And the sad thing about that was that every bill that he brought, and I believe he only had 6, as an incoming freshman, were all bills that were request bills from not the Chamber of Commerce, not a business in his area, not an industry, not a lobbyist, but shockingly people in his district that elected him. So yeah, it's just been such a frustration. But in this particular show today, this special that we're doing today, I think it's super important to realize that what you said initially coming in, and that is, if we don't even know what a conflict of interest is, where are we? I mean,
it's really tough. And when you look at the wave of political correctness that caused people to allow really harmful things like transgender story hours and things that we couldn't speak out against because it would be impolite. The removal of conflict of interest is essentially doing the same thing in our legislative system. So if you look at the definition, now it's an affront, it's an attack to actually vet someone for conflicts of interest that may not be in the public's best interest. So a conflict of interest in the dictionary is defined as a conflict between the private interests and the official responsibilities of a person in a position of trust. So the actual conflict lies between their private interests, which we all have. We have relationships, we have families, we have all kinds, we have businesses. A conflict between those and the official responsibilities of a person in a position of trust. The misnomer here is that there's nothing in this long-held definition that is any judgment of character. It is assumed as a risk for any human. It's about relationships and competing interests and human nature, not character. Yet when people are vetted now, and as the media, the growth of the independent media has stepped back into the role that they were always supposed to play in vetting public officials, now we're attacking, we're doxing, we're slandering is how this is caged to the public. It's not. We're looking at the private interests of the person and their official responsibilities and bringing that information to the public so that they can decide. Now, in state law, when we're looking more now at education, public education, state law clearly acknowledges conflicts of interest are a problem that need to be responsibly handled. So Title 70 is where all of everything we do in public education either happens or doesn't out of Title 70. So it's 75-113. It says it limits personal relationships within public education at the local level. So elected school board members, they recognize if you're serving in a district, you might have private interests that are too much of a conflict for you to make decisions for everyone's children in that school. And let me read you just one sentence from it. Quote, no person shall be eligible to be a candidate for or serve on a board of education if the person is currently employed by the school district governed by that board of education. Okay, so you can't work there. If you're working there and you're making policy decisions, that might not be in the best interest of just parents sending their kids to school. Okay, back to the statute. Or is related within the second degree of affinity or consanguinity to any other member of the Board of Education or to any employee of the school district governed by the Board of Education. So let me back up. You can't be within 2 degrees of affinity. Now, affinity would be like we're dating, we're best friends, we're something. That's a relational term. Consanguinity means a direct relation, right? So 2 steps. You cannot be married to, that's 1 step. They cannot be your children. They cannot be your grandchildren. They cannot be your aunt. 2 steps, and you cannot serve on that board if someone within 2 steps even works at the school. So we recognize that public education, kids involved, is an area where you have to be very careful about conflicts of interest. Now, when we take a look at what's happening at the State Board of Education, and we've had 2 confirmation hearings so far, both have involved some form of conflict of interest, and typically these governor-appointed folks slide through the approval process of the Senate Education Committee and onto a vote in the Senate without questions, without any kind of vetting. But because so many grassroots and independent media have brought up some concerns. These have been really interesting. And we went through the one with Mr. Vandenhend recently on your program. And now the greatest, most identifiable conflict of interest we have with Stitt's 3 appointees that he placed on the board in February has to do with a gentleman named Michael Tinney. And again, this has nothing to do with Michael Tinney's character. He seems like a very nice man who would actually like to serve children in the state and education. It has nothing to do with who he is as a person. But the vetting and the interesting questions that were happened in that hearing, I think really need to be explored, because they reveal that conflicts of interest are flowing throughout our entire legislature, and they know it.
Well, and I'm going to even jump on that and say, and they act as though they don't know what a conflict of interest is, or then it just doesn't matter. I want to get in this comment that John says, how can you have a superintendent, principal, and special ed teacher in the same school then? And I assume you mean that are related.
So let me talk a second about that. This is a huge problem in our small rural schools. So somewhere in time, the legislature, and you've got to understand how many of these people answer to, they hate to be called teachers unions or school administrators unions, so we're going to call them the education NGOs. They answer to the NGOs, and somehow they got into state law that if your district has less than 400 students, the restrictions that I just read to you from Title 70 go out the window. You can all be related. You can be on the board and your wife can be the superintendent. You can be on the board and your kid can be teaching or be a principal. So that is how that is happening. And we see so many problems in rural education related to those conflicts of interest.
Because there's a protectionism among related individuals.
It is. And what the example that I always like to turn to so that we can all relate to, we are all subject to decision-making faux pas related to our conflicts of interest. If you go to a high school, say, basketball game, and you do not have a child on the floor playing or involved or going to either school, you just watch. Your blood pressure stays down. You don't think the referees are being very unfair. Now go to a high school basketball game where your offspring is on the floor and it's a tight game and there's a lot of calls and fouls and you think they're all going against your child's team. This is something that happens in the human brain when we love other people. If you don't have conflicts of interest, you don't have enough family and people to love in your life.
Denise says that's cronyism at its best. And we've talked about that numerous times. And John says that's another reason why these little schools need to consolidate. I hadn't really thought about that because there's part of me that really does not like the idea of consolidation, but I don't know. I think John makes a point. All right. Well, why don't we pull this video up here of our confirmation hearing of Michael Tinney to the State Board of Education. And this is the Senate Education Committee. And this was it Tuesday?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Tuesday. All right.
Can we talk quickly about, I think it's important for people to know this committee is chaired by Senator Adam Pugh. He is a Republican. And it is co-chaired by Senator Ali Seyfried, who is also a Republican.
Thank you. All right. You ready?
I am.
Here we go. You tell me when to stop, okay?
Okay.
Although I may pick some stops too. We'll see.
I hope
you
you
are
do.
recognized to present the nomination of Mike Tinney to the State Board of Education. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members. Members, I've also had the opportunity to get to visit with Mr. Tinney this morning and get to know him, and also I've been able to see his performance on the state board as to this date and what he's been able to accomplish. Very well impressed, very well honored to be able to carry this nomination. And I don't really want to tank his nomination, but as we were visiting, I saw on his resume he's from Mangum, Oklahoma. Well, that's where a lot of my family hails from, and we started comparing some of the last names as they go through. It's possible we actually may be like distant cousins. So I don't want to tank the nomination with that knowledge out there now, but with that, Mr. Chairman, I do pass, and would like to ask Cousin Tinney to come up here and speak. So.
Can you pause for just one moment? So I do want to point out that is Senate Pro Temp Lonnie Paxton, also a Republican, and it was not expected that Michael Tinney would be before this board just a few days earlier. His senator of record, who would be the one typically to carry his nomination to the board, without that, typically the nominee doesn't make it to this level. Lisa Standridge, she's from Tulsa, and she refused to carry his nomination.
No, she's from Norman.
Oh, she's from Norman. That's right.
Norman.
Okay, that's right. That's right. Sorry.
Yes.
She's from
That's
Norman.
okay.
And she refused to carry his nomination. There was a lot in the press about it. She was upset by the way good board members were thrown off the board, especially from Norman. Kendra Wesson is who Michael Tinney replaced. And there's a lot of speculation here. It looks like Senator Paxton just said he just met the nominee this morning. So that is before the meeting. His words with Michael Tinney were his vetting.
But he'd seen him on the board.
Mm-hmm. He did say that apparently he had watched maybe the live feed of the state board meetings that Michael Tinney's been in too, but actually meeting him, I was pleased that in the Senate committee, there were a couple of different people, Senator Devers and Senator Sacchieri, who at different times talked about how they took the time to meet and vet nominees in this process. So I am giving some applause there.
Okay.
Thank you very much for carrying my nomination, potentially cousin Pro Temp. Thanks to the committee and Chairman Pugh for carrying this and hearing me. I want to thank the governor for asking me to serve on this board. Just to share a few things about myself and about my teaching experience. First, this board is very challenging and very humbling. It's a very big responsibility. My father was a coach and teacher in a small town. He coached basketball, and I caught my small town basketball fever from my dad. The first time that town ever went to the state tournament. My sister was a 40-year special ed teacher. Her husband was a teacher and a coach. When I met my wife, she was teaching in elementary school. After we were married, she continued and she taught in a middle school and more. I was a former teacher. Just to give you a brief background, I taught in a small school in Chattanooga, Oklahoma, right out of college. I got a master's in education before that. I was immersed in small town school. I did everything. I taught a different subject every hour. Drove a school bus, ran the concession stand, senior sponsor, senior trip, umpired baseball games, and all sorts of things. But I was kind of like a sponge in those first years, just trying to learn all I could from those career teachers. The superintendent was a great school man, very wise person who took his time to share things with me, give me insights. And one of the main things he taught me was, it's not just getting across the subject matter. You have to learn to understand those students. You have to learn to build relationships. I can remember one of the most vivid memories was my first Halloween in the town of Chattanooga. I'd been there about 2 months, a little more teaching. I was in there grading papers in my little rent house in the middle of town, and all of a sudden, wham, 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 just like these softball sides. What is going on? And I kind of gathered my senses, and I realized somebody is throwing eggs at my house. And I popped outside, and by that time they'd run off and were gone. And my first thought is, well, welcome to education, welcome to teaching. I also thought, I need to track those rascals down and deal with them, but I didn't. As a matter of fact, I learned my lesson and began to build relationships in that community. And it's ironic that the next Halloween, some of those same students offered to come by and guard my house. So I at least succeeded at something. And later on, as I became more a member of the community, I got the opportunity to teach a Bible class at the church with some of those same youth, and later on became a part-time youth director in that community. It's my belief that the backbone of any school system is excellent teachers. And sometimes they're the backbone of the community also. My wife is, most of you probably know, is the executive director of Professional Oklahoma Educators. And through them, I have had the privilege of meeting some of the finest award-winning educators, teachers, administrators, retired teachers and administrators in the entire state. That is a great resource. I often, when I'm with some of those people, it's invariable that somebody will come, hey, I was one of your students. And usually they will thank them. And it's impressed on me that I believe the reach and influence and impact of a good teacher is almost untraceable. When I was appointed to the board, I kind of began my role as a sponge again, trying to understand, because looking at all the facets and shifting paradigms of education is complicated. It's given me a new appreciation for the State Board of Education, for this education committee, and for the legislature and the jobs they have to do. And I appreciate that. I take my role on this board very seriously. I'm honored to be on there. I will do the best I can and stand for following the law, following the truth, and doing the best we can for our children and teachers. And again, I thank you very much for the honor to be here. I just would say, I think it's much harder today to be a teacher than it was when I was teaching. We didn't have cell phones, computers. We didn't have people videotaping you on your worst moments of the day. We didn't have social media. So the educators today have a hard time, and I want to be there for them, be there for the kids, and do the best I can. Thank you very much.
Members, will there be questions of the nominee? Senator Rader, you're recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for meeting with us. And again, I will follow up on the question I told you I was going to ask you. I've been contacted to say that because of the position your wife holds, that you cannot be unbiased on this board.
Okay, I'm going to stop just a second because it just now hit me. This is the second time going through it. And it just now hit me that Senator Rader sought out Mr. Tinney and said, hey, I'm going to ask you this question.
He
I'm
did.
going to ask you this question during the confirmation hearing.
It is interesting. So Mr. Tinney's remarks, a lot of them admirable, but it is clear that they want to reframe at every step in this confirmation that his wife being the head administrator for over 30 years of an education NGO is not a conflict. It's a resource. You're going to hear this throughout the entire process. And I think it's important that we have the conversation about why it could be a potential conflict of interest. Later on, Senator Devers does a very good job of sort of digging into this. But right here, I think, is the dismissal phase. We're going to ask you about it, and you're going to frame it as though it's a wonderful thing and a source of information to bolster his performance on the State Board of Education. Now, I think we probably should explain to people, I think most of your listeners know. So the POE, they call themselves a teachers association. So they provide some training, things like that. But the reason that teachers primarily let these teachers associations that we used to refer to as unions take money out of their check every single month is that they provide, in this case, $2 million of liability insurance. If they're accused of anything, they represent them legally. They will represent them civilly if they are part of a suit that comes against themselves civilly or with in conjunction with a school district. For example, for failing to protect students from inappropriate teachers, that they are supposed to legally have their back. They do other things. They have workshops, they do trainings, they keep them up to date. The other thing that they do is they have lobbyists, which makes these organizations political. They have lobbyists that work to promote legislation and policy that's in the best interest of the educator.
I want to pull up this comment from Gracie. Sounds a lot like the pre-questions during the presidential campaign. I do want to make a point about that and jump on what she said. And I know Gracie's bringing that up because there was a lot of consternation about these news organizations giving Biden the actual questions before the interview.
Correct.
And for those people who haven't really thought about it, let me just kind of frame it like this. If I'm going into an interview for a job and there's a person on the panel who's interviewing me for the job who has been feeding me the answers to the job, to the questions that they're going to ask, or they've been sending me the questions that are going to be asked by my panel, how much better do you think I might do in my interview than someone who did not have access to the questions that would be asked during the interview?
Considerably better. And if you were given questions that were formulated to undo rightful objections of the public prior, that's a manipulation of the vetting process.
Well, I think it's important that people understand that, because I know that when I was listening to that initially, I didn't even catch it. And then going back through, I was like, eh. And I want to put up John's comment too, because he said, with his wife being in the position of an NGO and him being at the state board, is that private government partnership in the making?
Oh, I believe so. I believe so. And so a great example here of how Mr. Tinney, in his relationship with his wife and his access to those folks that he's already said are a great resource, could come into conflict with what parents want. Mr. Tinney said, he was talking about how much harder it is to teach now. And I don't disagree. I know a lot of teachers. I don't disagree at all. But he said, we didn't have people videotaping you on your worst moments during the day. Well, that's a big battle cry right now between parents and the education NGOs, because parents want cameras in classrooms. They're okay with cell phones leaving classrooms. They wish they would, because they want their kids to focus and to learn, as do teachers. But they want cameras in classrooms because trust in public education and the safety of children is at an all-time low in Oklahoma. And already he's on the side of the educators and sort of verbalizing against what it feels like to be a parent who does not have the access to the decision-making system.
Well, and I'm going to reframe that in a different way. Just say what you said, but reframe it in a different way. A teacher has access to children that a parent doesn't during a school day.
Correct.
How would you respond to that criticism?
I would say, well, first of all, one of the first things I did was when I was contacted by the governor, and I said, you know that my wife is executive director of POE. He said, yes, we know that very much. I said, does that bother you or bother anybody? I said, as an attorney, there's no direct conflict. I'm not going to represent anyone against the Board of Education or have anything to do with them on a legal basis.
Okay, I'm going to stop it right there because I can't let it go. I can't let that go. So in his mind, as an attorney, the only conflict of interest could be him representing the board against another teacher.
That's
Is that
the
what he
way
said?
That's the way he's framing it, and not about the general, where his private interests in his relationship might affect his decision making on the board. He's putting that way to the side as if it doesn't exist. And he's saying, as long as I'm not the attorney of record. So if he were a farmer, would he never have a conflict of interest because he's not an attorney? It doesn't hold any water. It doesn't make any sense. And I find the interesting thing in this part of his comments is that the candidate here, the appointee, recognized the conflict of interest, brought it to the governor's team's attention, and the governor's team and lawyer said, not a problem. When it is unidentifiable by the definition of conflict of interest, a conflict of interest. Interestingly, in the Vandenhend interview, a similar kind of softball question, it may have been from the same senator, was, how many times have you talked to the governor to try and separate him from the governor? And he said, maybe 4 or 5 times in my life. I only met him one time before he appointed me to the Russo board. Don't even know the guy. The follow-up question that didn't happen is, who were you talking to at Stitt's office? How much conversation and direction were you given when you were appointed to this? This has become a political lightning rod. These people got on the board and immediately tried to shut down all talk of illegal immigration on the board. And they're vying for, now through legislation, control of the board's agenda outside of the state constitution and state law. So there was some talking going on here between Stitt's staff and these appointees and directing their actions on the board. And at least Tinney is admitting it. He talked to them. There was back and forth. He brought out the conflict of interest, which I admire, and they brushed it away.
Okay, let's see what else.
But, you guys feel free to run it by your attorneys, anybody else that bothers you, the attorney general, whatever else. They said, they came back, no, we have no problem. I actually think that POE is a great resource. Again, as I mentioned, some of the finest educators in the state of Oklahoma are members of POE, whether they're administrators, teachers, retired teachers, and I can tap into that resource. I can go out and if there's an education policy or statute been enacted, I can see how that really plays out on the ground and the pros and cons, how it really works in real life. And I can take that back to the board and we can make better policies or amend them or work, use what works well. So I think POE is a tremendous resource.
I'm sorry, this is another thing that just caught me the second time through. Did he or did he not just say he would use his knowledge of people in POE to change policy or create policy?
Yes, he did. So he is.
That's what it sounded like to me. So 1 second. So if he recognized that he had a conflict of interest to the point that he spoke about that with Governor Stitt's office, and then says, I can, not only is it great that we go ahead and do this, but I can use these people to help me formulate policy once the state legislature allows me to put agenda items on the board agenda.
Right. So you see here and you start to feel, and he's honest about, there will be a flow of information about what's happening in education and his role in the state board with the folks within his wife's organization at the POE. He is admitting that. He does not see it as a conflict. He sees it as a great resource.
There's outstanding legal attorneys there that know education law very well. I can ask questions of them. So that's a tremendous resource.
Can we stop there? So I need for folks to understand, when a teacher is accused of something like, say, the sexual abuse of a child or physical abuse of a child in school, there's an investigation going on. If they're a POE member, they're going to contact the POE's legal team. And on their website, they are proud of having the largest in-house legal team of any education NGO in the state. You need to understand that Mr. Tinney will be going into executive session. He already has. He's already done this 3 times. and reviewing cases of teacher misconduct for which the POE is providing either in-house or they contract in a removed way for these services to sort of keep it away from the reputation of the organization. That POE is paying for the defense of those folks. There's a process, and this is, they may or may not be going through criminal court. They may or may not be going to civil court. It has nothing to do with this. There's a process at the state where they are referred to a hearing officer, and the investigators at the Oklahoma State Department of Education under Ryan Walters, they now have a qualified investigative team full of former law enforcement who investigate these things, turn that over and present it within a hearing in that court. That teacher would be represented by whoever their NGO is, if they're part of one of these education associations, paid for by that organization. Those findings then go back to the board, and the board makes a decision about if that person should still retain their teaching certificate.
So I'm going to couch it again. So Mr. Tinney's wife is I believe she's the founder of Professional
She
Oklahoma.
says no. She says she's not the founder. She's the executive director.
Okay, executive director. She is the executive director of Professional Oklahoma Educators, POE. Mm-hmm. Teachers pay dues to the POE in order to have the benefits of this association.
Right.
Mr. Tinney may have to go into a board meeting in executive session where he would have to determine whether a teacher loses their certification or not because of actions that would require the removal of their certification.
Yes.
If Mrs. Tinney's organization, if that teacher is a member of Mrs. Tinney's organization and that teacher pays dues to that association, that teacher would therefore, without a certificate, obviously not have a job to pay the dues to the association.
Interesting point. Would you pull up Roberta Lewis's last comment? So Roberta says when they go into executive session, the board members have access to statements from victims and whistleblowers that the wife's organization, I should say the POE, will potentially be representing. That's a very good point. So do you remember last year when the group of legislators, including the gentleman that chairs this committee we're watching, were trying to get into the State Board of Education executive sessions where the only thing that they do there are things that can't be out in public. The sensitive cases of child sexual abuse, teacher misconduct, that is protected information. And the fight last year was, we can't just let legislators in. You're not even willing to sign a non-disclosure agreement. We don't know that you're not going to go to the press and say all kinds of protected things that can't be happening here. Well, this is the same thing. So now we have a flow of information that we've admitted from Mr. Tinney to the POE, this two-way flow of information, and we have this very sensitive executive session information about weighty things. I mean, teachers are losing their certifications potentially. This has the worst things that have happened to families and children. It's really important to keep these lines really drawn.
Well, and I want to point out what her follow-up, he will have access to information that his wife would be able to use to help her legal case should he speak about any of that outside. And we are not accusing Mr. Tinney of anything. We are just bringing up possibilities of what could happen, but there's no accusation to be made here.
That's why they call them potential conflicts of interest. And again, personal interests versus your role. Is there any potential conflict?
So I want to bring up Gracie's comment too, off topic, and I don't think it's off topic actually, Gracie. As a non-elected person, he's appointed, who would have the power to remove him should the need arise? There is no one but the governor that can remove his own appointment.
Correct, as he did in February when He brought 3 new members on. He removed 3 of his own appointees to do so.
Okay, so hold on, Roberta.
And I want to point out, those 3 appointees were not accused of any misconduct at all. It wasn't about that. It was at the pleasure of the governor, and he pulled them.
Absolutely.
Will there be additional questions? Senator, we have a due pass from Pro Tem Paxton and a second from Senator Peterson. Senator Devers, you are recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Tinney, thank you for providing yourself and your expertise towards this position. If you noted the last board meeting we had several questions, and I expect there'll be several questions today. And it was noted by several of the members of this board that we have a responsibility to our state and to the children and the teachers. We represent a whole lot of people, and the board has a high duty and calling for the good of our educators and the students. So I hope that you'll take these questions in good faith and know that, you know, there's probably hundreds of people that would like to be sitting in here asking these questions, but they can't, and so it's just a few of us. First question is, what Oklahoma statute governs education? And yeah, we'll just start with that one.
Well, there are a lot of them. You may be referring to Section 104 that outlines the duties of the Board of Education, which the first line of that, I believe, is the supervision of the school system of the state of Oklahoma is invested in the Board of Education. So that's a very important job. And the next line, I think, talks about the board will enact policies and rules regarding the carrying out of that duty.
Okay, I'm going to stop that. He didn't answer the question properly, as far as I'm concerned. I may be wrong, so you guys can help me out here. But did he not ask the statute? Did Devers ask the statute?
He did, and you know.
Okay, then the answer would be Title 70, and this is from an attorney.
Correct. And you know, if we go back to this, is him thinking he's being more prepped than Mr. Vandenhen was in his recent confirmation hearing, because Vandenhen was asked these things and hadn't read the statute, didn't know specifically the board's role in statute. So Mr. Tinney now knows the one section of the board's role, but isn't familiar with Title 70. And I will tell you, Title 70 is incredibly complicated. These board members,
and about that long.
If any state ever needed to clean up its education statute, it's Oklahoma.
Yep.
So for these people to understand that statute, hopefully as an attorney, that he'll be able to get up to speed on that.
Well, I just found it. If you're an attorney who has been at some point representing teachers, and yet Title 70 doesn't come to mind immediately.
Well, let me stop you there. I don't believe that Mr. Tinney has ever practiced education law. He is an oil and gas attorney. So later on in the hearing, he talks about how he was a teacher. Later on in the hearing, he discloses that in his 3rd year of teaching, he started law school. So his teaching career was very short. You know,
am I wrong though? That wasn't he identified as an attorney for POE for a bit, or am I wrong?
Oh, I don't know that. I would have to check. I had not heard that, but I would have to check.
I may be wrong.
Really interesting. I don't know. I'll research that.
But I thought he was, but I may be wrong. Okay. Shall we continue?
Yes, please.
Follow up, Senator Devers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you noted, your wife is the executive director of Professional Oklahoma Educators. And under what circumstances would you recuse yourself from board votes regarding POE members?
Well, first of all, I can't tell you, we've had 2 meetings so far. I can't tell you how many POE members have been in front of us, if any, because I don't check on that. I want to try to treat everyone the same. POE doesn't like bad teachers out there either. The other thing is, if I knew a teacher, particular teacher, as with any other board member, I would probably make that knowledge known to the board, and if they asked me to recuse myself, I would.
Okay, will you pause there for a second?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
They would have to ask him.
Mm-hmm. And so he's saying he doesn't know if members are POE before they come before the board. So he'll talk later about talking to his wife and how that's very difficult to keep those lines. And I just want to set up this next question, and this is Senator Devers who's doing this questioning. This next question asks about a particular teacher. Her name was Caitlin Foltz, and she is the teacher who's also a foster parent, and she and her husband, there was a video from a neighbor of a child who was locked out of the home in the cold, sort of begging to come in, didn't have shoes on, didn't have a coat, and it was an unusually frigid, cold day in Oklahoma. So Oklahoma, actually it was law enforcement, came in, did their investigation. I don't know what else that they found, but they were both charged with, child endangerment or child neglect charges, something of that nature. So she is facing criminal charges, and so is her husband. And at the April board meeting, this was the only sort of exception in a group of teachers. They went into executive session. They talked about suspending some. They talked about suspending and sending them to the hearing officer. So that means your certification is suspended. We're setting you aside to keep kids safe while this is being investigated. And we're sending it to the hearing officer so that the teacher can have their due process. It's a double sort of a vote. So there was a block of teachers here, 5 or 6 of them. They came out, one of the board members motioned to move forward with those with an emergency suspension and referral to the hearing officer. Mr. Tinney then made a motion to exclude Caitlin Foltz from being suspended and to just send her to the hearing officer. That meant she would continue most likely to be paid at home on paid leave while she's suspended, if that's what the school had decided to do. If she's not suspended, the school could make the decision to bring her back during that time. So it muddies the waters a bit. I just wanted to set the stage for people before Devers asked this question.
Thank you for that, by the way.
At the April board meeting, you made a motion to exclude Caitlin Foltz from a group vote and instead send her case to OSDE investigators. Can you explain why you did this, and were you aware that she remained on paid leave from the school during this time?
I don't know that all her circumstances were brought up. I can't discuss what went on in the executive session, but yes, my recommendation was to refer her straight to a due process hearing where findings of facts would be made and both sides would present their argument. That would come back to the board, to us, and we would make an intelligent decision on whether to revoke her certificate or not. I take the protection of our children very seriously. I also know that as a lawyer, every person in America is entitled to due process before they are penalized. So that would have been my recommendation. I voted no on the first motion because I thought I was going to be able to bring that motion up, and the first motion passed, so it looked like to some people I voted no against disciplining that teacher. That is not correct. Okay,
so just you might want to pause right there.
Yeah, let me throw in this comment from Roberta. This suspension takes a burden from the district because until the suspension happens, that teacher is still being paid.
Correct.
And they have to hire somebody to fill in. So they're getting a double whammy essentially from doing it that way. I'm sorry, continue.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is interesting because she does. He argues that she's not getting due process, but if he had voted, eventually they did vote on both the suspension and the send to a hearing together for Ms. Foltz and the rest of the group, and that passed by 3-2. Tinney and another one of the new board members voted against it. We see teachers come through this process and be regularly suspended since Ryan Walters became superintendent without criminal charges against them. And everyone nods, and there's agreement on what we're seeing here so far in the investigation warrants protecting kids. Law enforcement stepped in. We don't know all the details of that, but there are criminal charges related to a child here, yet 2 of the board members wanted her to remain paid.
Well, here's my question. I was so confused when I watched this the first time. I never thought he answered the question. Am I wrong? Because apparently there was a whole group of them, 4 or 5 or something, and then they pulled this Caitlin Fulks out to treat her separately than the other ones. And then Senator Devers basically asked why. What was the answer? I'm not sure I got the answer.
I think he did talk about why he felt like that needed to happen. I don't know if you have to necessarily agree with his thought process, but I think he did give his thought process. So in the next question, Senator Devers asked the next most obvious question. Why just this one?
Hold on. Roberta says this is the second time he's admitted that he thought he was voting on something that he wasn't.
Yes. And that has been, since these members came onto the board in February, there's been a lot of confusion about process.
Lots of confusion.
Follow up, Senator Devers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Was Caitlin Fultz, whose certificate suspension was deferred until April 2024, was she a POE member?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Have you ever discussed the Caitlin Fultz case with, or similar cases with your wife?
Probably in general, because she's my wife. Yes. I do not go into details that were discussed in the executive session.
Follow up, Senator Devers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And that was going to be my follow-up. You have access to executive session material, including sensitive information like victim names and statements, and would wonder what safeguards are in place to ensure that the information does not make its way to your wife, who may represent teachers involved in these cases.
Well, number one, our materials stay there at the meeting. They take those up after the meeting, so we don't have that. So we don't have any of the written materials, any evidence, any of the findings of the investigators. We cannot take that with us, so I think it's probably a good idea. The other thing is, I guess it's just my personal integrity or ability to not go out and blab things that went on in executive session. Some things are public, as is the lady's name you're mentioning. There are some things out there that are public about her. Everybody or people that watch the news may know that, but I don't, to go beyond that or to go into detail, I would not do that. I hope I would never do that, what goes in the executive session. I try to be very careful. Sometimes it's hard. You're talking to your spouse, but I try to watch that very carefully.
Can we pause?
Okay. And this was the thing that I heard him say this, and I literally almost fell out of my chair. He literally said, it's hard not to tell my wife who has a teachers association these things. And yet it's not a conflict of interest. I was absolutely so, I guess give him props for honesty or something. But at that point, then then if you're going to be honest, then at that point you should step away from the dais and say, I think I should probably not be here.
And this is the very big change in how our state government is. Oh, go ahead.
1 second. So Shelley said, she looked it up and she said he and his wife formed POE together. Did you get that off of their website? Where did that info come? Because I didn't look up their website, to be honest, before we got on the call. So if you'll let me know where you came from, where that information came from, I'd appreciate it. But that's what Shelley said.
So what I was going to say is, in the past, in days gone by, a public servant would bend over backwards to avoid even the appearance of a conflict of interest. And by him saying, there was a hesitation in the, I don't know, I don't think so, about is she a POE member, which brings up a really good point. If we were going to say, yes, Michael Tinney, we think that we can put safeguards in place, as Mr. Devers asked about, Senator Devers, to be sure that this conflict of interest is not a problem in his decision-making process on the board. One of the things that we would need to know is we would need to know public disclosure of who's in the POE. And I can tell you, I can't tell you that Caitlin Foltz is or isn't in the POE. This is not public information. I know this is teachers, this is their own business. I understand that. But when you're working with other people's kids and we start to get into these processes, that would be a reasonable thing, that someone at the State Department of Education would have a record of who's in the POE so that they can safeguard Mr. Tinney from any decisions related to those educators. I would be in huge favor of that, but that's not where we're going. And then you're correct. We know the flow of information is there. And again, not vilifying him. Our spouses are our safe place to go vent our entire professional day. We all do it. I understand that that would be next to impossible. It would be for me.
I was just, sorry. Shelley said she just did a search and it came up.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I don't think that's abnormal at all, because
No.
at some point you have to be able to have, I mean, it's your spouse. I mean,
Correct.
I'm not faulting him for saying, yeah, that's hard. I'm faulting him for putting himself in a position where that would be hard.
Correct. And because we're talking about the board that we're talking about, and it's about the relationship and the overlap there, if Mr. Tinney were being placed by Governor Stitt on some kind of an energy board because he's an oil and gas attorney, and he didn't have any structural or business conflicts of interest there, we would not be talking about his wife and his family. There would be no conflict there. It is the nature of the relationship, not the character.
Correct.
Follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Rader brought this up earlier, but I'll just piggyback off of it. You know, your wife and your son are paid lobbyists for POE, and your daughter is a former lobbyist. Do you believe that these family ties present a conflict of interest for your role on the board?
I do not think so. I think my son is a very astute political analyst in my view. I think, again, it's helpful. We can talk about bills. He knows more about a lot of those bills than I do. We can talk about those bills and discuss them. I can bring that knowledge to the board. I can base my decisions on that knowledge. I think that's a very good thing. Speaking of him lobbying, I'm used to that. He's been lobbying me since he was about 2 years old. And I've learned he probably gets more no's from me than anybody else.
Okay, let's pause.
Yeah, I can't. I can't.
So just to reiterate, there are 2 current lobbyists and 1 former lobbyist. These aren't lobbyists for the food industry. These aren't lobbyists for the auto industry. These are lobbyists whose purpose is to affect education policy in the state. That's their job, and I respect their job. Teachers deserve to have an organization that represents their interest. The problem is he's not saying, I will never discuss these matters with the lobbyists in my family. He's saying they're a resource. I'm going to turn to them, and they're going to guide my decision making. I can bring it back to the board. Heck, they may even be guiding other people on the board, because I'm going to bring the lobbyist perspective to the State Board of Education.
So I'm going to just throw something up here 1 second. I hope you'll give me a little second of latitude here. So this is this is on their website. Oh, I'm going to have to remove this one. It better not go back. This is on POE's website. So you'll notice here is the Professional Oklahoma Educators logo at the top, live action alerts and policy updates. Here's a legislative alert. One of the bills that was being run was to allow the board members to be able to put an agenda item on the board agenda. We've discussed that quite a bit during Mr. Vandenhen's appointment committee meeting. And I don't see that particular legislation here on their update. I haven't actually read it. You have to go into the update itself, I think, to read the entire thing. But here's what they have here: key bills from POE's surveys, Oklahoma Promise, and it talks about
646 right there. So they're getting ready to, Senator Devers is getting ready to ask a specific question. Now that he's asked about the lobbyist in the family, he's going to ask about Senate Bill 646. So
I want to point out this is
yep,
Capitol News.
Exactly. So he's going to ask this question about this bill. And I want to go back just here to earlier this month. Earlier this month, this publication published an article about Senate Bill 224, which is the data bill, correct? Where they're wanting to collect all of our kids and our data from cradle to career. Huge push for Stitt's office. We've talked extensively about it here. You, Jenni, have written and talked about it probably more than anyone else. So I wrote the article, and Superintendent Walters, who's never given me a comment before, and boy, have I tried, did actually respond to a written request for a comment about where he stood on that bill. The authors of that bill were repeatedly in committee saying that Superintendent Walters supported the big database collection bill. Walters was not commenting publicly. He gave me a very short and very neutral statement saying, I don't know why they would be saying that. I've always been neutral on this bill. If the legislature asks me for data as the head of the SDE, I give it to them. It was a very neutral bill. I published the article, and within 5 minutes, the legislature suspended their rules. The House suspended their rules. And you can talk to Jason Murphy, independent journalist. He wrote exclusively about how out of bounds they were. And they had stripped and stuffed their bill to take power away from the elected official on the state board and give the agenda power, more agenda power, to these appointees into 646. That happened. They suspended the rule and had that bill come up like 5 minutes after the article. So one could assume that they were hanging that bill over our elected state superintendent's head to keep him quiet about the gigantic database bill that is coming from the Jeb Bush organization.
Okay. Would you, and then I did want to see, Shelley said, actually POE said that they co-founded. I just couldn't find that while I was, trying to flip through, I couldn't find it. Also, Roberta says 626 was a Title 20 bill. They stripped it and put in Title 7. That's a good point. And
That's
put in titles. Yes, put in Title 70 language.
Right.
But
without getting too complicated, it's about the most deceptive thing they could have done. The way they suspended the rules was saying, hey, everyone, it's going to be a busy day. This is their own Republican colleagues across the House. Going to be a busy day. The only way we're going to get it all through and not be here till late is if we just suspend the rules today. But they did that so that they could take one bill that had nothing to do with the State Department of Education, use that bill number, strip it, and stuff in their language to pull power away from an elected official in education. It felt like political extortion to me. I do not have proof of that, but the timing itself is suspect.
In other words, they didn't like who the people elected, so they wanted to take his power away. I think that's a pretty concise, Would you care to move forward?
Yes, please.
So POE has actively lobbied for Senate Bill 646, and that bill was directly related to reforming the state board. Do you recognize any conflict of interest here?
No, I'm not lobbying on that bill. I guess I have an opinion on that bill, but I would not see a conflict of interest. That's just, everybody knows somebody, people know who stands on what and not. I don't have any influence beyond probably anybody else on that bill. Maybe as a board member, I guess I can express my opinion to anybody, and they can all come up and express their opinion to the legislature about that bill, but I don't see any conflict there. No, sir.
Okay, did he or did he not say that he would go to the lobbyists directly and go to teachers at POE to get their opinion and to be able to free flow information? Did he not say that?
Yes, they are a great resource.
They are those were his exact words. That's correct, Mary.
They're a great resource.
Are a great resource.
And what's interesting is clearly the faces around the room must be showing an acknowledgement of this conflict, because Senator Pugh, who is the chair, then cuts off, it's not going well for Tinney, cuts off the Senator Devers in his questioning. They need some friendly fire.
Senator Devers, we have one more because we have some others in the queue. You're recognized for a follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A POE newsletter quoted your wife stating that Senator Standridge, who previously was supposed to carry your nomination but didn't, quote, values political payback more than serving students, end quote. Do you endorse this statement?
I'm trying to remember if I've even seen that or heard it, honestly. Everyone's entitled to their opinion. I was disappointed and disheartened by her position. I have tried, if you read the press, not to say anything really derogatory or detrimental. I went in and talked to her about it personally. It was a professional conversation, and I said, there's a lot of people that are going to get upset one way or the other on this and say a lot of things. I said, I'm going to try not to be one of those people. I will say this, my wife is, to her, and I'm glad, a great defender of me, and vice versa.
Senator Hicks, you're recognized for a question.
Okay, so if there's one line in this, so his wife has spoken out publicly now, we know. There's not a line there. She is involved in this discussion about his nomination publicly. And he says, I went in and talked to her about it personally. It was a professional conversation. And I kind of said, there's a lot of people that are going to get upset one way or another on this. So he went in and talked to her personally, and it was a professional conversation. That almost overlies that definition of conflict of interest. Your personal interests collide with your professional responsibilities. We see it happening real time with this couple.
Well, and I want to point out, and I don't know if you can share your screen or not, but I was contacted by Ginger Tinney and through Facebook Messenger, and she sent me a Facebook post that her daughter Rachel was doing in her vehicle and talking about how unfair this was, and I'm not going to put words in her mouth because I don't remember it. We'd have to look at it. I told Mrs. Tinney on the messenger that I was not interested in receiving that message, and I have been since blocked from any further communication. So I cannot see.
I do have that. I actually saw that. A constituent sent that to me, concerned about the involvement and thought that she was still an active lobbyist. I will say this is his daughter who was a lobbyist for the POE. And she does have some connection to this appointment, but we can talk about that later. So let me see if I can play this for you. Are you hearing that?
I am not, and it's not. You have to put share to screen.
I did.
So when you go down to present, and then it'll say share screen, and then click. Oh, I have to take this out first. Sorry, that's my fault.
Okay.
Now try it.
Okay, I'm going to start it over again.
Okay, you got to pull it into your screen though. You got to share screen.
Oh goodness, I did it and then I undid it. Okay, we're going to get there.
Okay.
Share screen.
Yes.
There you go. And let me start it over.
Hold on, it's not coming up. It has to. You have to be able to see it on there for it to be able to work.
Says StreamYard is sharing a window on my side.
It does. It's not. Oh, hold on. I got it now. I've got it.
Okay, I am going to start it over.
Okay, please do. Okay, we need to hear.
I guess you can read. I don't know why we don't have sound.
I don't know why we have sound either. By the way, thank you to everyone who's reached out.
Oh, wait, I got it. I got it.
Okay, let's back it up one more time.
Too many things. Okay.
Nope. Well, my father's been thrown into the political fire, and if you know him, this is not his thing. He's a no drama, no nonsense kind of guy, but he's in the hot middle of it. So I'll give you a recap of what's going on. By the way, thank you to everyone who's reached out about it, and your support means a lot. So my father was appointed to the State Board of Education by the governor. The reason being the board had just become very political, and really it was just a rubber stamp for Ryan Walters' political agenda. And my dad, a conservative himself, was put on the board to bring out transparency. My father's an attorney. He's intelligent. And let's just say he ruffled some feathers, called out some deception. And now there's a hiccup. How the process works. Your local senator, it's tradition that they advance your nomination so the Senate can vote on you, and then you're officially on the board. So my dad's senator is Lisa Standridge in Norman. She gave her word to the governor she would do this, but after my dad called out some deception and ruffled some feathers in a board meeting, she went back on her word. The sad part is that she says she has nothing to do with my father. This senator, Lisa Standridge, says it's because her friend got her feelings hurt from the governor. It's a personal grudge. She has so been letting her personal grudge keep getting from doing what, and my dad is caught as bait in this thing where she's trying to get back at the governor and protect Ryan Walters from being held accountable. So what do you do when a senator won't do their job? Well, remember, senators work for the people and not the other way around. So you can email her or call her office and let her know that, hey, I want Mike Tinney's nomination advanced. This isn't right what you're doing. Put aside your personal petty matters and do what's right for the state of Oklahoma. Are you there?
I am there. I'm sorry about the sound. I don't know what's not coming through with mine, but luckily the captions were there. So,
well, I'm not sure that we needed the sound because somebody could even, this was on, what is Rachel's last name?
Her Ackerman.
Rachel Ackerman.
Rachel Lee Ackerman is her Facebook, and she had several of these video posts. So she was lobbying for her father's nomination to go through
Mr. Chair.
after his senator of record refused to carry the nomination. So now we have the family of essentially a political organization lobbying for a family member to be on the Board of Education. This is very political. The conflict of interest here is not hidden, it's playing out publicly.
Well, I do think I was personally, I got my feelings kind of hurt with her whole, well, because the board had gotten too political. So, you know, this was the reason why her dad was being brought on to the board. And I think there's an ideological response there that kicked up in me that made it seem, first of all, that's not something I don't think I would do that, but I'm not, I mean, it's a free country, First Amendment, she can do whatever she likes, but I do think it's important to associate all those things.
Yes, and I think it's also important to associate his daughter, lovely young lady, loves her father. I completely understand that. Again, it's not about character. But when we look at who appointed Mr. Tinney, Governor Stitt, Tinney's daughter has worked directly for him within the last year. She has a business that's about professionalizing and increasing the etiquette for corporate employees, politicians, that kind of thing. And she did some work with Governor Stitt when he was pushing the campaign about how we should agree more agreeably and that politics should be about etiquette and positive discourse and bringing down any hostility. And she did some, I guess I would call it public relations work, in which she did some videos for him for social media where it's him and a Democrat House representative from Tulsa. And it plays off them fighting at the Thanksgiving table. And this young woman, Rachel Tinney, comes in and stops them. And they talk about decorum and etiquette, those kind of things. So she was working directly with Stitt. And there's a lot out there on social media of her connections to Stitt at the time that he was appointing her father to the State Board of Education.
Okay. All right. Shall we continue?
Yep.
Now, this is Senator Carrie Hicks, a Democrat, asking this next question.
Mr. Tinney, I was just wondering if you could share with us, what is your motivation or your desire for serving the state in this capacity on the State Board of Education, and what does public education mean to you?
Thank you.
So I would kind of consider that a softball question, but.
It's a good question. Well, as I shared a little bit, I grew up in a family of teachers, a lot of them, and went to public schools. My kids have been through public schools. I was a school teacher for a while. For some reason, I was felt called or inspired or whatever I applied for law school kind of on a whim while I was teaching my third year and got accepted to OU. So I made the decision I would try another way to go, and I still enjoy teaching legal seminars and things like that. But public education, I think, as I said about teachers, that's kind of the heart of our society. If we're a democracy, a republic, if we don't have educated, well-rounded people that know what's going on, we are in trouble. That's the lifeblood of a free people, is for people to be properly educated. I mean, I can go on and on. I don't know if you want to give me more specific. I can ramble a long time on my philosophy of education. You probably don't want to hear that. But if you got something else, I'd be glad to try to answer. Thank you.
Follow up, Senator Hicks. She waves. Will there be additional? Senator Carey, recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Tinney, for coming today. You're the only one I didn't get to actually interview, so just for the sake of parity, I'm going to ask my same questions that I did to the other school board members. One, what is your opinion of the role of a parent in the school system?
Oh, very important. If you get me onto my what's wrong with education speech, which I'll try to make sure, that's one of the things is many parents are very committed, and I applaud them. They watch over their kids, take care of their kids, they watch what their kids are doing in school, they watch who their kids are associating with. If they have the courage, they will check their phones and things like that, or limit their phone time. I applaud that. I think that leads to much better students and student results. Unfortunately, there are a lot of parents that don't do that, and I've heard again from teachers, kids come to school, they're sleepy. Some of them may be stoned a little bit. Some of them are not interested. Some are hungry. Some have such turmoil at home, they just get out of there for that. That's how, as a teacher, do you get a kid that's, life maybe hanging in the balance of their hand? How do you get their attention and try to teach them history? That's a challenge. That's why, the good teachers are so valuable. Some of them can do that. One of the things I learned, I'll go back to mine as a school teacher, I had trouble with certain, why can't this kid, they don't care about anything. Why can't they learn? They just do not care. They will not, I try to get them. And when I became youth director, I visited some of those homes. And some of them would be what you could call maybe that passed for a home. And then I understood this student has never seen anybody that even role models responsibility. So when I'm getting on their case to act right, they don't know what I'm talking about. So parents are, we need to get somehow to reach those parents, bring them in that are on the fringe out there.
Follow up, Senator Secchieri.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So how do you may have hit it a little in your introduction, how do you view your role as a school board member, and what do you think the most important part of that role is?
I think as a board member, I read the statute, it's incredible, it's a almost scary amount of responsibility. And I try to almost take that very seriously. I want to learn as much as I can. When I found out to be appointed, I'm an attorney, but I'm not I just have a little bit of education law. I started reading statutes and regulations, trying to get up to speed. There's still a lot of things I'm not up to speed on. There's so many, just policies and various facets of education. I think my job is to get up to speed and know, at least being informed as best I can be informed. Again, I think that's why knowing so many teachers and educators and administrators out there helps me to be better informed. And I just want, my responsibility is to the students of the state of Oklahoma. I love kids. They're important. They're the backbone, again, as I said, of our society. I want to support the teachers and educators out there and give them the best opportunity to have success with what they're doing. I could, again, go on, but that's the first thing that comes to mind.
Follow up.
Thank you again. How will you handle balancing the educational needs of Oklahoma's kids when your vote may not line up with what the governor is wanting or what the superintendent is wanting?
That's a good question. When the governors, they were vetting me, I pointed out, I said, I appreciate the governor, and I've never agreed with the governor on a lot of things. Some things I don't agree with the governor, or haven't agreed, or whatever, and we haven't. But I said, I will respect the governor's opinion on everything because he appointed me. But I said, I will do what I think is the best. That will be my position, and I'll tell you up front, I'm not going to be a yes man. I said, I want him to know that up front. If he doesn't want me to serve, then, I won't get somebody else. I had that conversation with him. So, and the same thing with, Superintendent Walters. There's probably a lot of things. I know we've gone at it a couple of times and we've asked questions, but there are things I'm sure agree with policies. There's some policies that are just pretty obvious that we need to have, and I think everybody knows that. I agree with those policies. If I see something amiss, it's the laws aren't followed or the rules aren't followed, or I just have a question or say, is there a better way to do this? I will bring that up.
Can we pause for a moment? There's just a lot here going all the way back to when Senator Sacchieri, who she's a freshman senator and kind of a rising star on the grassroots side. She's willing to ask these questions, which is really rare of a freshman who typically the leadership gets their hands around them and they don't speak up. But she asks what his opinion of the role of a parent is. And you can feel the battle that's going on here statewide. And it is the education establishment versus parents fighting for a role in education again. And he goes on a bit of a diatribe about, he says, unfortunately, there are a lot of parents out there that don't do that. So there's a major judgment about parenting. And, the inner libertarian in all of us says, it's none of your business what happens in the home, honestly. Government schools need to stop right there. So you can sort of see that he's on this side steeped in education establishment and with access to this education NGO that's throwing a lot of judgment on parents. And some of that is our education system, if you look at student outcomes, is dismal in Oklahoma. So there's a lot of people trying to push blame in every direction. And it's created this war between parents and schools. And then when she asks about the most important thing in his role, he says, again, I think knowing teachers and educators and administrators out there helps me to be better informed. So his information is coming from the education establishment. And that's okay to get information there. I don't hear anything about him even being interested in reaching out to parents about what decisions should be made on the State Board of Ed. Oh, you're muted. You're muted. No, you're still muted. Oh, there you go. There you go. You're back. Nope, can't hear you. Can't hear you.
How weird. It won't stay unmuted.
There you go.
Stay. To me, he's passing his incompetence off being able to teach all his kids onto the fault of the parent. Tammy said she's concerned because as to why Kendra was removed. Mary has done that on visit.com. I've done that on rope2.org. It was a kind of a political nonsense thing. Shelley says, oh, come on, you're all in each other's pockets. You'll be a yes man as long as it serves your interest. Dana says, Tinney is painful to watch. He just rambles. And I honestly, and Gracie says, circle talking. I've had a hard time following him, to be honest. I just don't feel like he gets to the meat of the question that's being asked.
Right. And then we may have run out of time here, so I want to paraphrase a little so we can jump ahead. Senator Sacchieri asks if teachers' livelihoods are more valuable than children's safety. And Mr. Tinney is sort of pretty anxious to go back to that 3-2 vote. He thinks she's asking about the teacher, Caitlin Foltz, and why he was the one to motion to pull her out and not suspend her. So that's how he sort of interpreted that question. And then we go into debate. And there's a freshman senator. Let's go forward just a little bit, Senator Hines.
That.
And I was
so it's a tough call.
I would say it's probably about.
Out there. I don't have a big argument with the way the other people. It was a 3-2 vote.
Okay,
as a
you're almost
vote,
there.
Could have gone either way. That was batted around. It was a tough call. See. That it's just so obvious that they're, really a danger. They're out there praying, or they're going from school to school praying. Then we, may take a different action.
That's okay. You can just let it roll. You're almost there.
If we don't we're dealing with a certificate. The school has the opportunity to suspend the teacher also from their position and send them home. And a lot of times you look at, well, if I don't have the facts here, I don't want to punish somebody just on allegations.
So Mr. Tinney's very unaware of the passing the trash that's happened with administrators. He wants to send these decisions back to the district where victims have been silenced for decades in many bad districts. Not all, there's good districts, but victims have been silenced. He wants to send them back to them to suspend them.
Especially in the small districts.
Right.
To some degree, that school, they're on the ground. They know the people know the community. They can take action if they need to remove that teacher out of the classroom.
Will there be additional questions? Seeing no additional questions, will there be debate? Senator Hines, you're recognized for debate.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last week or so, I'd had a lot of people reach out to me, or not a lot, a few phone calls and emails, giving me their opinion on why I should vote no for you. If I only had to go what I read or what I'd heard, I might have been a no, but I resolved to ask you a couple hard questions we talked about earlier when I got here and see what your answers were. They were truthful. I think you've got the goodness of our kids in mind. I think you're here for the right reasons. I'm a freshman senator. I thought I was drinking through a fire hose when I got here. You got plopped down in a much heavier firestorm than I was. So kudos to you with that. I think that you are here for the right reasons. Whether I agree with all your decisions or not, doesn't matter. As long as you're putting the kids first. And for that reason, I'm a yes today.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, if you'll pause there. So Hines is also a freshman senator. Admits that he just talked to him this morning right before the meeting, asked him a couple of questions, and now that he knows him personally, he has no problem. And there's nothing in this hearing that he considered a conflict of interest too great to vote no on this.
And may I point out, we have no idea the questions he asked him. He didn't even intimate them, nor were they asked in a public forum where everybody else could hear the answers to those. Mm-hmm. So it could be like, I think Roberta up here at one point said, that's a Biden question. So tell us what your flavor of ice cream, your favorite flavor of ice cream is.
Correct. And so if you're feeling frustrated that they are choosing not to see this conflict of interest, this next part in debate by Senator Devers is very refreshing.
Will there be additional debate? Senator Devers, you're recognized for debate.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Tinney, you've been put in a very difficult position, as has been noted multiple times. And what I have to say is not about your character. It's not about you as a man. This has to do with, I think that there is too severe a conflict of interest for me to approve this. This is not a statement about POE as an entity or their efforts. That has nothing to do with them. I just am thoroughly convinced in my mind, in my conscience, that due to the nature of this conflict of interest, that it's too strong, it's too severe, and I don't believe that that's what would best serve our children and our state, especially considering you do love your wife and you love your children, appropriately so, and I think that again, the decisions that are put before you that will affect our state, and with POE being a union representing thousands of teachers in our state, there is too great an opportunity for it to have undue influence. And I understand you could respond and say, I'm a professional, I'm an attorney, I can separate those things, but I think it's, as hard as you will try, I think that flow of information and that flow of decision making and the flow of knowledge is too entrenched. And again, this is not about you and your character. It is a statement about keeping these decisions free and clear from these conflicts. And that's why I will be a no today.
Senator Hicks, you're recognized for debate.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to make sure that we're being accurate. POE is a professional organization. They provide support and they provide some services, but the bargaining and negotiation agreement dictates that only 2 organizations in the state of Oklahoma could potentially be characterized as unions, although we are a right-to-work state. And POE is not one of those organizations, so I just want us to be accurate. Additionally, I know that there's probably a lot we disagree about when it relates to education, but having spent time with you this morning and also knowing a lot about education myself, having been an educator before taking my role in the Senate, I do believe that you are sincere in your pursuit to serve children. And I do believe that you will be fervent in finding the truth, asking the difficult questions, and probably wrestling with a lot of votes that you're going to be asked to take in your capacity. And so I find you to be someone who truly is trying to do what's best for the state of Oklahoma. And so for those reasons, I will be a yes today.
Will there be additional debate?
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I have to stop there. This is just my personal perspective after I listened to the amount of things that I listened to regarding this. And there is not one Democrat who has been kind to Ryan Walters. I've never seen it. I'm all over social media. I pay attention to these things. There's not one person, not one Democrat out there who has had one nice thing to say about Ryan Walters. Now, I don't know. I haven't seen Carrie Hicks's social media accounts. Maybe she has. My feeling is that that the Democrats are pretty well lockstep on here in this particular issue, and that they have been so bad that they've been to board meetings fighting to get people to not let people in and screaming, carrying on, and all kinds of drama associated with the more liberal perspective about this person.
Correct.
How is it that just suddenly, and I mean, I'm not trying to put, Senator Hicks down or try to get into her head or anything like that. I'm just talking about what's coming out of her mouth that I'm hearing and responding to as a person. That's all I'm doing. And I'm extremely cynical about what she said, because I just simply cannot believe her saying, yes, we would love to have somebody on the board who is consistent with Ryan Walters' positions. I can't see that happening. So if the Democrats are going to align themselves with these, because I believe they did with Vanden Hende as well. Mm-hmm. We'll have to go back and check, but I believe they did with Vanden Hende as well.
They voted for Vanden Hende.
Okay.
Every Democrat.
Okay. So at this point in time, I'm not believing that myself as a Republican am being represented by these new people on the board. But that's just my personal feeling about it, because and I haven't agreed. Everybody knows I don't agree with quite a bit of what Superintendent Walters has done so far, just in terms of, we won't get into that. But what I'm saying is I'm not a sycophant for Walters. I'm not a sycophant for anybody. I look at what people do, not what they say. And so I guess I'm a little weirded out, I don't know another term to say it, by the fact that all of these Democrats are coming to the defense of these new board members. And yet I've heard several times now, well, we met you this morning and I think you're great. Mm-hmm. So he's a milkman or a mailman. I mean, I don't, this is so odd that you can meet somebody and just be convinced that they've got, I don't know, maybe I'm sorry, go ahead.
When someone in this process starts to bring up a legitimate concern on behalf of the people, the voters, such as a conflict of interest, or tries to properly vet someone within our state government system, suddenly you will start to see the uniparty coalesce. And we have to stop thinking in terms of that we have a Republican leadership, because we do not. We have a uniparty leadership, and you're threatening the establishment. And I think when we go just a little farther here and Senate ProTemp Paxton closes the debate, you'll start to see why they're circling the wagons.
And Roberta's, yeah, if these were Ryan Walters picks, Hicks questions would have been very different. And
They would. And coming up here in just a second, Chairman Pugh takes it upon himself to look out into the audience and to say, I see your daughter, Rachel Ackerman, here's here, and your son, Daniel. I don't see your wife. He knows them well. They're a family of lobbyists, and they are in an education NGO. He's had lots of dealings with these folks. So that shows you right there how policy is affected. And then after the hearing concludes, his daughter posts a picture of her, and he happens to mention too, she's sitting next to, and there next to you is Governor Stitt's appointed Secretary of Education, Nellie Sanders. And there's a picture on social media after of Pugh, Sanders, and Rachel Ackerman, the nominee's daughter, out in the hallway shaking hands. So this is the political establishment, and education is always intertwined with that. That is who is being introduced to the State Board of Education.
Seeing no additional debate. Mr. Tinney, I'll just offer one thing. You violated my rule because you have two family members here who were not introduced. And so I'm going to do it so I get credit
so
now.
I don't get in trouble.
I see your daughter, Rachel Ackerman, who's here, and your son, Daniel. I don't see your wife, but I also see Madam Secretary of Education, Nellie Sanders, who's here. Thank you, Madam Secretary, for being here. So if you're a nominee that comes after Mr. Tinney, please remember, I say that somewhat in jest. ProTemp Paxton, you are recognized to close debate.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, thank you for the questions. Thank you for the debate. A couple quick things is I want to express my gratitude to Mr. Tinney and all the nominees who are here who serve our state, without compensation, sometimes on boards. And I said this with the last nominee that was here for this exact same board. This shouldn't be a controversial board. This should be a board where people serve in order to help serve our children, to help serve educators, help make sure our education system is what it should be. And so it is with gratitude that you're willing to step into a role like this in a board that should not be controversial, but unfortunately it has become that way. On the issues of conflict of interest, if legislators abstain from votes every time there was some conflict of interest similar to what we've talked about today, you would never get a quorum of a number of votes cast. Because my wife's a school teacher for 30 years, can I not vote on anything education? Because somebody's a former state employee, can they not vote on anything to do with pensions? I mean, that's the thing you look at. You start talking about conflicts of interest, better look at the mirror and see if it applies to us as well. I mean, it's part of what we do. This situation is not a conflict at all. This is a situation where family members are involved in the same industry that this board kind of regulates as far as from the standpoint of.
I can't.
What I think a voter is feeling when he says, if this kind of conflict of interest kept us from voting, we better look in the mirror. We're all screaming, yes, please do. He's basically in this diatribe saying conflicts of interest aren't a thing here at the state government. And it's really frightening given that they're written all over statute. And to liken his wife, he's a state senator, to liken his wife just being in a classroom and him considering that could be a conflict of interest of me voting, to this very close relationship that information is going to be sensitive information could flow back and forth. This man's already admitted he's going to be looking to this NGO for guidance in his role on the state board. To liken that to Paxton's wife just being a teacher is just disingenuous. And how
I'm
many
starting
real
to believe
conflicts
that,
do we have? How in the state legislature? How many real conflicts do we have?
well, and I'm starting to believe that these people are all in with it, with our congressmen who time the market and buy stocks based on what the FEC has been
Correct. And no one
the
does
information
anything.
the FEC provides in committee hearings.
Correct. Direct conflict of interest, but somehow they've become unfashionable to recognize in modern politics.
Well, I mean, it's just, I have to play that just 1 second again.
Okay.
I mean, that's the thing you look at. You start talking about conflicts of interest, better look at the mirror and see if it applies to us as well. I mean, it's part of what we do. This situation is not a conflict at all. This is a situation where family members are involved in the same industry that this board kind of regulates, as far as from the standpoint of they get to look at what's going on out there and decide what's important and decide what's the right policy to move forward. This is not a.
They're involved in the same.
He says
that
the
this
same industry
regulates. That's what he said. That's almost the definition of conflict of interest.
He did. And then he goes on to say, he says, yes,
Conflict.
This is a situation where family members are involved in the same industry that this board kind of regulates. As far as from the standpoint of they get to look at what's going on out there, decide what's important, and decide what's the right policy to move forward. Quote.
So just want to make sure that's clear that if we're going to start pointing the conflict finger, we can point at ourselves the first thing. So that is something that we need to kind of look at as we move forward. That's not what this is. We have a very qualified nominee. I am very proud to carry it, and I also want to point out the fact that I'm carrying this nomination because the governor requested the nomination and because the senator who originally sponsored the nomination asked me to carry it. And I'm not going around anybody. This is done because I was asked to do it. So by the senator who originally sponsored this nominee. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield and ask for a yes vote.
That concludes debate. Clerk will call the roll.
Senator Devers, Senator Dossett, Senator Hicks, Senator Hines, Senator Mann, Senator Peterson, Senator Rader, Senator Reinhardt, Senator Sacchiari, Senator Paxton, Senator Seifrid, Senator Pugh.
Aye.
10 ayes, 2 nays.
Having received 10 ayes and 2 nays, I declare the nomination.
Okay. I would invite.
Were the ones that voted no.
Yes, only Devers and Sacchiari voted no after hearing everything we just heard. And I would invite, again, I reached out to Senator Standridge for comment about if she recognized the conflict of interest, if that had anything to do with not carrying his nomination. And really, we need to clarify, did she ask him to carry this nomination, Paxton? That's what he said. Or was she just asked to butt out so that they would move this nominee ahead? Senator Standridge is very welcome to reach out to me. The email is connect@v1sut.com. I sent an email request. I have not heard back from her.
So I want to, this is the daily, Oklahoman. Okay. But according to what it says in this article, is that Paxton wasn't available for comment Monday about why he changed his mind. Hold on, I'll bet you I didn't pull this in.
Yes, we hadn't talked about that. He had refused. After Standridge refused, Paxton refused to carry the nomination previously.
That's correct. He said, and then what caused Paxton's change of heart? It remains uncertain, but during a confirmation hearing for board member Chris Vandenhend on Thursday, May 15th, Paxton took an unusual step for a Senate pro tem and spoke out against what he and others believe to be an orchestrated email campaign against Vandenhend from far-right sources. Some of those emails compared Vandenhend to Mikhail Gorbachev, the former Soviet leader of the Soviet Union, and others attacked Vandenhend's family members. Paxton spoke out about his disgust with the campaign and said the messages were quote, by people who feel empowered by a keyboard, who, quote, send emails at 2 or 3 in the morning, end quote, and called their content, unquote, unfair, hateful opposition, unquote. If you shared those things, quote, then you're the problem, he said, unquote. So I'm trying to see if there was anything else in there, but originally Paxton had said when Standridge said she would not carry the nomination, he came out and said, I will not carry it either. And then suddenly he decided he would.
Yes. And I want to point out to the Oklahoman, they said that the emails said, did they see the emails? Did they confirm that information before they printed it?
I didn't see any emails. There weren't any emails in there. They just said what Paxton said.
Exactly. And he did not have them in hand at the meeting either. So I think that should have been, as a journalist, it should have been caged as Paxton claimed the emails. I mean, Pugh claimed the emails said what they said, but I'm having a hard time believing that they said that.
There were a couple of good comments on here.
Okay, while you're finding those, let me say this nomination, though it flew by that committee despite testimony, will be coming up sometime this week in the Senate for a full vote, Mr. Tinney's nomination. So we will see if the rest of the representation in the Senate has any problem with identifiable conflicts of interest.
So Shelley said he didn't get to the, remember I said something, I personally could not understand the answers that he was making. I thought they went all around. I didn't see any, there was certainly no surgical precision in answering those questions. Dana said, but he does know about passing the trash. He's been present during Sherry Conley speaking about it. And Sherry went to POE to discuss it too. And that's why moving back to small schools won't work. Everybody knows, and we've talked about that before. Teachers weren't removed until after the election. Devers has, whoops, I'm having trouble with that. Hold on a second.
That was a comment about Devers, said he's become a trusted person who will ask the tough questions.
Yes,
that is pleasant to see. And, you know, in talking about these education NGOs, it's not just what they say, it's what they never say. We don't see them publicly ever joining the fight to stop this epidemic of child sexual abuse in schools. They're just not there. You would think educators and an association of great educators would be screaming from the rooftops, this has to stop, we won't tolerate it in our profession. And the Administrators Association, you would especially think that they would be the ones lobbying to put legislation that empowered them to get rid of these people, that empowered them to do something about it. You don't hear it.
Well, I personally believe that this was quite educational. I personally believe that what's gone on for years, I mean, years and years and years, is that these people come before they're appointed by whatever governor, they stand, they maybe get some softball questions. Most of the time it's just do pass, second, pass. I mean, and they're moved on. So Senator Sakieri and Senator Devers need to be really applauded for being people who actually wanted to get answers to questions instead of just softball questions. Or I thought Senator Hines' question was almost offensive to me. I talked to you in the morning outside of this group, but I don't intend to ask you those questions in front of everybody else. And so you fix that for me.
Correct.
I find that to be extremely upsetting. I mean, extremely upsetting. And it's certainly not at all. I would hope the representatives from his area would be extremely upset at him over that, because that is, there's no transparency or accountability there at all. I did the asking. I'm not going to tell you what the questions were. You're good.
Well, when you see the Senate pro tem as a leader in the Senate body, setting the standard that we don't worry about those conflicts of interest or we wouldn't get a quorum, you cannot expect a freshman senator to think he's done anything wrong by asking a couple of curt questions before you rush into a meeting and saying, I know this guy, he's good.
Well, I do want everybody to get the idea, and part of the reasons why Mary and I have done kind of this series, since we did one on Mr. Vanden Hende as well. If I had time to tape all of these things and watch all of them, I would do one for all of them, because people are not asking critical questions. Sometimes they don't even have the knowledge base to know what questions to ask. They hear the answers, and it's just so, it's all good that people stop to think about, they stop thinking critically about what is being said and just go, oh, well, I guess it's okay then, because, the rest of the senators in the room, except for a couple of them, are okay with it. We have got to start paying attention to this, because these people are appointed and they only lose their appointment at the pleasure of the governor. So whatever they do, we have no way at all of influencing. Can we speak to the members? Absolutely, we can. That's not forbidden, for God's sakes, but that's not the point. The point of the matter is we don't have the ability to vote them off. We don't have the ability to unappoint them. And what we have, and I think Trump said this numerous times, and so many people have said it, we have a government of bureaucracy. We are governed by a bureaucracy. We're not governed by a Republican form of government anymore, because so many of these positions in government are appointed. We don't have there's no say that we have over those. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about government by bureaucracy. It's the bureaucratic gunk that's associated with these people who are appointed that nobody can really do anything about because they're appointed.
Correct. The hired and the appointed stay much longer than the elected. And I guess, in closing, I would say if you're a legislator out there, go look at Title 70-5-113 and see how this level of conflict of interest isn't allowed in the local districts on the same kind of a body. And shouldn't our highest board of education in the state be held to at least that standard? And then secondly, again, the definition of a conflict of interest, a conflict between the private interests and the official responsibilities of a person in a position of trust. That's what it's about. We'll see how it goes in the Senate.
Well, yes, we will. And I hope that we have the opportunity to be able to do the same thing for the other board member as well. And this was the board member who had a very difficult time reading the standards and wasn't able to vote on the standards that I believe he'd had for several months or something.
Since February.
Yeah. So that's another one that we need to look into. But guys, I really appreciate you taking the time on a Memorial Day Friday weekend to join us today, and thank you so much for that and for all your wonderful comments. Please share this information. Please share this information with your senator and have them talk about conflict of interest with you, and have them look at the conversation that we had surrounding this meeting at the Senate Education Committee, and really have a conversation with them, because this vote will be coming up. Thank you, Mary, for being with me. Always appreciate you having you on. It's just the most, I love it. I'm so glad we have the opportunity to do this together. Again, thank you for all of you who tuned in today. And you guys have a wonderful Memorial Day weekend, and we'll be back again Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. and we'll see you then. Thank you so much.